Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion Rural Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, wherever you are in the world listening to this show, I want to thank you for listening. You're not going to want to miss my two special guests. I have two special guests today. They're husband and wife. And I'm going to tell you about my guest. But before I tell you about my guest, I just want to tell you, I do this show because I want people to know about resources. I want people to know about people who can help them. And my two guests are wonderful resources. And I have to say before I forget, they both co-wrote this wonderful book, the AARP Caregiver Answer Book by Barry J. Jacobs and Dr. Julia L. Mayer. Folks, I'm going to tell you right now, I wish this book was available 25 years ago. I wish this book was available 15 years ago. If you are a caregiver, if you know a caregiver, and even if you're not, you will probably eventually be a caregiver. That's a given. You need to buy this book. I'm telling you that right now. Go buy this book. Buy two. Buy one for yourself and give one as a gift to someone that you know, because this book is truly a gift. And now I'm going to tell you about my guest. With me today is Dr. Barry J. Jacobs, who is a clinical psychologist, family therapist, and a principal for Health Management Associates, a national healthcare consulting firm. Dr. Barry Jacobs is a former magazine journalist. He is the author of and co-author of several books. He wrote The Emotional Survival Guide for Caregivers, Looking After Yourself and Your Family While Helping an Aging Parent. And Dr. Mayer, Dr. Jacobs, both co-wrote AARP Love and Meaning After 50, the 10 Challenges to Great Relationships and How to Overcome Them, which sounds very interesting. And they also co-wrote AARP Meditations for Caregivers, Practical, Emotional, and Spiritual Support for You and Your Family. And the newest book that I just mentioned, the AARP Caregiver Answer Book, which this book is in question and answer form. And I can't help but rave about it. It's excellent. And Dr. Julia Mayer also wrote a book called A Fleeting State of Mind. And Dr. Julia Mayer is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Media, Pennsylvania, who has specialized for 3 decades in helping women in caregiver roles, as well as those with troubled marriages and histories of sexual trauma. Both Dr. Barry Jacobs and Dr. Julia Mayer were both caregivers. They know what it's like. And I've said this on my show before, and I'm going to say it again. If I'm looking to read a book, if I'm looking for advice, I want someone who's been there. I want someone who's walked the walk, and they really, truly understand. And I'm just so excited to have with me today Dr. Barry J. Jacobs and Dr. Julia L. Mayer. Welcome to Chatting with Betsy.
Oh, thank you so much, Betsy, and thank you so much for your effusive praise for our book.
Thank you.
Maybe you can tell people about not by 2, but by 3 copies. So we're very happy with your endorsement.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you are welcome. And I forgot to mention it. I'll mention it now. That Dr. Barry Jacobs also has written for AARP, that organization, a column. And, it's funny because I get that magazine. I've received that magazine for many years now. And I just never noticed your name until recently because now I know who you are. But I have seen your books and your articles in there. I just, didn't know about you. So I want to thank you for contacting me and connecting with me to help promote this awesome book. When I tell you, I'm going to call you Dr. Barry and Dr. Julia. Is that okay?
You can call us Barry and Julia, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Doctor. You can just call us Barry and Julia. That's fine.
Okay. When I looked at this book, I cried. And I'm going to tell you why I cried. I cried for tears of joy. And one, it brought up a lot of emotion, but tears of joy that there's a book that can help people. And I really like that you have at the end, and I don't mean to be morbid, folks, it's just a reality of what to do after caregiving. And you address that in your book, because that's a huge difficulty that people have is after caregiving. Who am I? What do I do with myself? And I love how you address that in the book, among many other topics. But I want to ask you both, how did you come up with this idea to do this book?
So, Betsy, we had written 2 previous books on caregiving, and I mean, there's a lot to say about caregiving, so we still have a lot more to say. We've been working with family caregivers as psychologists for 30 years, and we also, as you mentioned, have our own caregiving experiences. And then, once people think of you as a caregiving expert, then they, friends and family members and neighbors and colleagues would ask us questions all the time. And we found that the same questions came up again and again and again. And it was always a little frustrating to us that we know there's a universe of information out there about caregiving, but when people, particularly at the beginning, find themselves in the position of caring for a family member, whether it be an aging parent or disabled spouse, they're kind of lost at the beginning. So we wanted to provide them with answers to those questions that we're pretty sure that many caregivers have. And the book has nearly 150 questions on a whole range of caregiving topics, not just psychological topics like self-care and family dynamics, but also very pragmatic topics like finances, dealing with insurance companies, partnering with physicians, and as you point out, also making the adjustment to the post-caregiving life after the person you're caring for has died. So this is really kind of a culmination of decades of work that we've done.
Yeah, we wanted to cover everything. I don't think we probably did that, but we wanted to get so close to it so that any question, especially a new caregiver has, they can look in the chapter about that topic and they can find someone's actual question about that and get our answers and also our resources and ideas about other places to look, everything. We just wanted to be like a roadmap for caregivers.
This is excellent. Actually, the next time I go to my neurologist, I'm going to tell him about this book. This should be in every doctor's, primary doctor and neurologist office, really, in my opinion, because when you get the diagnosis, you have Alzheimer's or you have Parkinson's or whatever illness you have, your mind goes blank, first of all. Yeah. You're like in a state of shock. And then for the most part, unless things have changed, you're on your own. People don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. And they need guidance. And I really feel that your book is guidance. I really feel very strongly about that, which is why I'm going to tell my neurologist he needs to buy this book. I don't want to give it to him. I want it. Excuse me. I want to keep this book. But I just, you're lost, right? And you look for support. I know that when my mother-in-law, when she was diagnosed, that was in 2000, there wasn't any information. There was no guidance. My husband was diagnosed 2010. Again, there wasn't much information about early onset Alzheimer's. There was no guidance at all. And you flounder. in my opinion, your book is a lifeline. It's like someone throwing a life preserver out to someone who's drowning in the waters of caregiving and not knowing what to do. That's how strongly I feel about your book.
Well, and thank you for saying that, Betsy. And that was the intention of really providing, as Julie says, that roadmap for people so they can get an idea of how to navigate this new territory that they're in. I know it's distressing to hear that it's so hard for folks to find the information that's out there. We know that they can always go to the Alzheimer's Association website and get information about dementia. They can always talk with, as you point out, their neurologist, and the neurologist, the medical officer will have certain information. But what happens early on is that people they're just not quite sure which information to trust. And they're kind of flooded with their own feelings, and they have a hard time taking in what information is available. So again, by having a book that's on the shelf that they can come back and refer to, our hope is that they can gradually take in the information that they need and really feel oriented going forward.
Yes, and I'm so glad in your book that you mentioned palliative care and hospice care. I really thought that was very important. And I think, you know what, eventually you might have to do a book too. You might have to do a second edition on it. And I just really feel that, and sometimes can't put my thoughts into words, but knowing that this book was written not only by skilled, professional, experienced psychologists, but you were both caregivers for your parents or step-parents, and that is important. To me, it's important to know that Barry and Julia aren't just talking from the top of their head. They're talking from experience. You walked this. You know what it's like to deal with an aging parent. You know what it's like to deal with siblings that may not be cooperative, or parents that are, difficult. You know all this. And that, to me, that really is very beneficial for the reader to know that.
It definitely helps inform everything that's in the book. We have helped people for decades, so we were helping caregivers even before we were caregivers, but it made an enormous difference. And in particular, just to understand the emotional experience of being a caregiver and the stress and the exhaustion and the love and, the feeling of, I want to do the best I can. And like you said before, our final, we talk about how to deal after the caregiving is over, because we also experienced that sense of shift from we were so busy caregiving that we, had sort of stepped away from our lives in certain ways, and we needed to be able to get back to that. And it felt very important to make sure that other people understand that's a very common experience and give them some ideas about how to do that.
Yeah, well, one of the things.
Go ahead, Barry.
Just to kind of give your listeners a better feel for what we went through. We went through a 9-year period where we first took care of Julia's father, who had vascular dementia, and then after he died within 6 months, we were moving my mother and stepfather up from Florida to live near us. Because my stepfather had very bad Alzheimer's and dementia, and my mother, who was very frail, simply couldn't take care of him any longer. And so we moved them up to live in an apartment a mile from us, and then we got very involved in their lives for the next 7 years. And first, my stepfather was quite affected by dementia, but unfortunately, over the next few years, my mother became affected by dementia too. So we dealt with a lot of dementia, and that's extraordinarily difficult to see someone you care about really in some ways disappearing, their personality changing in front of you, and really just they're becoming more and more dependent upon you. And so we had that experience at the same time we were raising our teenage children, and working our full-time jobs, so we were those sandwich generations that are stretched between caring for generation above us and generation below, and we really, it was not easy. I mean, even though we supposedly went into this knowing something about caregiving, we had to really do it ourselves, and particularly for an extended period of time, it wore us out. And by the end, I'll just say, I mean, I was very sad after my stepfather died and my mother died, but I also was relieved because it had been a long, hard course, and I was ready to not be a caregiver anymore.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. I have to ask you this, and this is kind of personal. How did you support each other through your step-parents' journeys? And that's really important, is to have your spouse or partner support, because with Matt's mom would tell me she's getting like her mother because Matt's grandmother had Alzheimer's. She didn't want me to tell Matt, but I had to tell Matt, and I had to get Matt involved. And Matt he was not supportive. I was trying to be supportive of him, but it's really bad when your spouse makes you the enemy when you're not the enemy. You're very fortunate that you both support each other, but did you have any difficulty supporting each other at any time during your caregiving journey?
I don't know that we had tremendous difficulty, but don't forget we're two psychologists. We should be able to work this out.
Yes.
If anyone can, but
that helps.
I know it does. I mean, but a lot of people have tremendous grief that they don't experience, and instead they bicker and they fight and they become enemies, like you said. And it's easier to be angry than sad, and it's easier to fight than deal with the reality of somebody with this diagnosis, with dementia, who's, diminishing and will ultimately die. It's hard stuff. And so, unfortunately, a lot of people, rather than connecting around the grief and sharing their feelings and supporting each other emotionally, it's easier to push people away and to argue. And it's very hard to overcome that. We've certainly both worked with couples where that's exactly what's happened. And, we try to bring them together. We try to help them understand that they're both in pain and they're both struggling, and that they could be supporting each other, and it would bring them closer during a very difficult time of caregiving one of their parents. Or it can make their relationship feel very strained, and they can feel very lonely, because caregiving can be so lonely.
Yes. Oh, yes, that's true. I definitely agree with that. I have to tell you both a funny story. I'm sure both being psychologists, it helped you deal with your situation. My son, he was in a social skills psychology group. He's on the spectrum, autism spectrum. And one of the parents was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I forgot which one. And she even worked in a specialized children's hospital. And I said to her, well, you really must be able to handle, your son's situation. And she said, oh, no, Betsy. He unravels my nervous system in 15 seconds. She said, I'm depressed. I take antidepressants, and I'm not dealing with the situation. And I was thinking then, this was many years ago, I'm thinking, well, if you can't deal with it, what does that say for me in dealing with the situation? But we have to realize that professional people are also regular human beings that have difficulties sometimes in dealing with problems, difficulties in their own life. So I just had to share that.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. We may know how to talk. The best thing I always say, the best thing I got out of graduate school was meeting Julia, so we learned certain ideas. We learned how to talk about feelings. We learned how to really. Over the years, we just, as any spouses do, we learn each other, we get to know each other and learn how to support one another. But during our caregiving years, it wasn't perfect. We did pretty well, but I mean, just to give you an example of one of the difficulties we ran into early on, is that after we had moved my stepfather and mother up from Florida to live in an apartment a mile from us, I sort of went overboard in spending time with them, trying to be supportive of them. I kind of thought that was what I was supposed to do. And it took Julia to kind of point out to me that I was really doing for them at the expense of doing for our children and being present for her. And that, like a lot of folks in a family situation, we have multiple family roles. We're not just an adult child to our aging parents. We may be a spouse. We may be a parent. We may have other family responsibilities. And so I had to learn to balance those responsibilities better. And so it was with Julia's feedback that I kind of realized that what I was doing was a little out of whack, and so I needed to pull back a little bit and find a better balance.
And it was out of whack because he felt guilty.
Oh, yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Forgot about that small thing there.
So he was over.
Well, yes, and we do that. Guilt, oh, my goodness. I mean, who as a caregiver hasn't felt guilt? I've met many. I mean, I've been doing this show for almost 6 years, and it seems like I've been in several caregiver groups over the years, and I run a caregiving group, and guilt is a huge, huge problem, and especially how caregivers deal with it. And Barry and Julie, I'm a huge mental health advocate, and I always recommend counseling for the caregiver, because sometimes the caregiver, you don't know that you're burnt out. You don't know that you're snapping at people. You may not realize it. I know I didn't. I did not realize. I worked in a preschool, and I was snapping at these kids because I was working 40 hours a week. I was taking care of everything, and I thought I had to be Superwoman. You know, give me my cape, got to take it on the chin. And it was getting to be too much, and I was really on the verge of a breakdown because I thought I had to be the strong woman. And I learned, you don't have to be strong, and I did go for counseling, and it helped me tremendously. You can't do this alone, folks. You just cannot do caregiving alone. You need support, and you also mentioned that in your book.
Yeah, no, Betsy, I mean, I thank you for endorsing counseling. It's a way of getting feedback from someone who's subjective and basically may say to you, you can't, there's no such thing as super human beings. We're all human, just human beings, and that when we take on too much and get too stressed, we're not going to be able to perform at our peak with any one of the roles that we've taken on. And we have to really be kind to ourselves, and not. It doesn't help any caregiver to beat yourself up and hold yourself to a standard which is not realistic. And so that's something that we've talked about with our psychotherapy clients forever, but it's something that we had to learn personally, firsthand. And I'll say it, especially me. I had to learn. I thought I could be Superman. I've always thought of myself as Superman, by the way, but I realized that I'm not Superman. And I had to really lower my standards for myself and not judge myself so harshly. And that enabled me to not feel so guilty.
You make an extremely important point, though, Betsy, that recognizing when you're burning out is crucial. So you were snapping at those kids, and because you noticed, because you could feel yourself falling apart, you went and got support. There are a lot of people who don't do that, and we want everybody to do that. It's so important that you have to take care of yourself. You have needs too. We're not superheroes. We might do great things, but there are limits. And so recognizing when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you wake up feeling dread, when everything is irritating, those are all signs of burnout that it's important to recognize if you're having them so you can go do something different.
Oh, absolutely. And I know you talk about self-care in your book, which is very important. And Barry and Julia, because I'm a Jersey girl and my father's daughter, I'm very blunt when I say that self-care is so important. It's a matter of life and death. It's really a matter of the caregiver's quality of life during caregiving and after. It's so important, that self-care, that sometimes we feel, oh, you know, I won't take care of myself because it's taking time away from my loved one. But I always tell people, if you want to enjoy life during caregiving and after, you need to take care of yourself. You need to make that time to go to the doctor, to just deep breathe sometimes, you know, meditate, whatever it is that brings you peace. It's so important.
We couldn't agree with you more. This is something that a lot of caregivers sort of know, like they know it intellectually, but they have a hard time putting it into practice. And so we talk it in the book, and we talk with our own psychotherapy clients about how do we actually put these things into practice. How do we protect time for ourselves? How do I identify some quick things we can do to replenish ourselves, and that so that it doesn't have to be such a time-consuming endeavor, and that, you know, we have to really be kind to ourselves and make sure that we are giving ourselves the care we need in order to be the best caregiver we can be, which is what all of us want to be.
Exactly, and Barry and Julie, I've been saying this for a very long time. There's no such thing as a perfect caregiver. We're going to make mistakes. You know, mistakes are made. We learn from them. There's so much information out there now than ever before for caregivers. But I know that I felt guilty a lot. I felt guilty after Matt died. I felt guilty picking out the wrong hospice, what he went through, and I learned to let it go. And I think that, you know, mental health is so important, and I'm 67. So back in my time growing up, you didn't discuss your feelings. You didn't discuss mental health. I'm glad that's being discussed more now. And people think they have to have a strong persona, especially after their loved one dies. They think they have to stay the strong person, and they don't. And I think that it's so important for people to acknowledge their feelings and validate them. And, you know, there's going to be, I know I'm going all over the place, there's going to be what I call the new normal after your loved one dies. I had to get used to that. I had to get used to, this is how I'm going to feel this time of year. There wasn't anything wrong with me. I didn't have to be fixed. I just had to realize this is what is new for me, and to learn to recognize it and live with it. But it took me a long time to do that. And I can't recommend grief counseling, any kind of counseling, enough. And I want to really make it clear to the audience, please go for counseling if you need it. Talk to your primary care doctor. Get referrals in your area. It is not a sign of weakness. It's not. It's a sign of strength.
We couldn't agree with you more. We feel very strongly about that, because if you deal with your emotions, in particular, if you are willing to work through your grief and feel the sadness, feel the anger, feel whatever comes up, because grief is really complicated, and it isn't just sadness. It can be anger. It can be frustration. It can be that you feel cheated, that the person, you know, you're having memories of deprivation. It can be anything. The idea is if you can tolerate those things, if you can walk through it and feel all the feelings, you come out the other side actually stronger, more capable, more able to deal with the challenges of life. But it's a hard journey, you know, when you lose that person that you were taking care of, you have all kinds of grief. And you're right, people often feel like they're supposed to just be strong and stoic. But what we find is if they're willing to do the work, they really improve their quality of life.
100%. I still go for grief counseling. Matt died in 2020. January 1st, 2020, and I'm still going for grief counseling, and that's why I always, talk about it on my show, because I feel that if people hear me say that I go, and I'm not ashamed of going, that I hope it encourages someone else to go and get the help and support that they need, because it's difficult. Caregiving, as you know, Barry and Julia, it's difficult. After caregiving, it's a whole different situation that's difficult. And I know that caregivers, a lot of them, they promise their parent or their partner or their spouse, oh, I won't place you, and then they have to place them, and then they feel guilty about that. When I always say, don't promise, because you don't know what the future has in store. I always told Matt, this is kind of the sixth sense of humor. I have a twisted sense of humor, Barry and Julia. Help me get through caregiving. I told Matt I couldn't promise him about placing him, because if I feel that I thought it was better for him, if I could no longer do it and he needed more care, that I would place him. And, of course, he would say he would run away. But I did tell him, I said, somehow, some way, I'm going to share your story to the world. That I said I could promise you. And he said, he would call me Booby. He said, Booby, don't talk about me.
Well, it's such a wonderful thing, Betsy, that you are sharing his story and your story with the world and making positive meaning out of what sounds like a very difficult experience. I can tell you, you mentioned a number of, in what you just said, you mentioned a number of things that come up commonly with caregivers. So one is, do you make that promise? And your advice is good advice. Please don't make that promise. But even if you make that promise, your job is not to kind of uphold every promise you ever made, but is to make sure that your person you're caring for is receiving the best care that they can and to meet their needs at whatever state of disease they're in. And, I ended up placing my mother in a nursing home toward the end of her life, as well as my stepfather. And not that I was happy about doing it, and it was hard to get them into those to nice places and to visit them there. But, for my mother, she was having multiple falls. She was hospitalized 3 times in a year. She'd fallen for broken bones and then had long rehab stays. My stepfather, he was very confused. He was roaming around the apartment at night, playing with the electrical outlets, and he got a hold of a toolbox. He would be taking apart the faucet. We did it primarily for safety, because we couldn't provide the 24-hour care that they needed in order to make sure that they weren't going to be harmed. And so placing someone in a nursing facility is very hard. It's an excruciating decision, but it's almost always the right decision. And then in terms of how people feel, how they adjust after the person they're caring for has died, we've seen many caregivers who just sort of assume they're going to go back to life the way it was prior to becoming a caregiver, and that almost never happens. Because caregiving changes us. We learn things about ourselves. We learn new skills. The things that we used to do may no longer just have the same meaning and purpose for us. And we've seen many caregivers who, after their loved one has died, they go on and find other ways of providing care for other people, because now they know how, and two, it's because it was so important for them to do this work. They don't want to stop what is a kind of good moral work that they were doing for their loved one. So there's a lot of changes that people go through, a lot of transitions throughout the whole caregiving journey.
Oh, there sure is. It is quite a journey, and everyone is different. I know for myself, I learned a lot about myself, and I thank Matt every day. I said, your journey changed my life, and I thanked him for that when he was dying, and I promised him I would continue to go on with my work. I never thought of myself as a leader or an advocate, and yet I was for many years. But just didn't, realize it. Never, Barry and Julia, did I think I would be interviewing people. I'm the shy person. I would, if anyone would have told me this like 10 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy. I'm not going to be interviewing people. And it really, you are different. You're not the same. And it's up to us to choose. I always say that, to choose whether it's going to make you a better person or a bitter person. It's up to us. We get to choose. And I will tell you, and I'll tell the audience, I have a whole new appreciation for life. I really do. Even when unfortunate things happen, I say, okay, I have my health. I'm going to get through this. And I'm grateful for every day. And I think it's because Matt died. He was 66. I lost my brother a year after Matt. My brother was 67. Life is short, very short. And I'm going to enjoy life as much as I can until I go. And I just hope to make this world a little better place while I'm still here. And I just really have a whole new outlook on life. From going through caregiving. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, it gives you a feeling of purpose, and you certainly have that. And, that you've been able to use your show as a way to continue on with that meaningful purpose. We want caregivers to feel more confident, more competent. They have to talk to doctors. They have to learn medical stuff. They have to do all kinds of things that they never thought they would have to do. And maybe even some of their older friends don't understand what they're living through, or they're scared of a dementia diagnosis, so they back away. And caregivers have to get through that too. And sometimes when it's all over and done with, they have different friends or different goals in life and different ways of looking at the world, sort of like you're describing. And as painful as it is to lose somebody, at least I think the way that we see it is there's growth in the entire experience. And if you're open to that, there's some beauty to that as well as pain.
Yes, there definitely is. In your book, I'm looking at the chapters, or maybe here's an idea for another book. I'll give you a job. How does parents deal with their children when it comes to caregiving? Because sometimes we forget that, they're kids, they're young. We have a hard time. They have a hard time. And really, my heart goes out to people who have young children when their spouses get diagnosed at a young age. I feel that we can teach our children valuable life lessons from caregiving, but we also have to let them communicate with us and let them tell us how we feel without them being fearful of judgment. And I'm glad I had that open communication with my son, that he could tell me, I don't like this. It makes me sad. And we could talk about it.
I'm glad that you're able to have that communication. And what are the barriers to communication? Well, the main one is people may be afraid that if they put their own feelings into words, that they'll upset the other person or make that other person more upset. So sometimes there's what's called a conspiracy of silence in families where, nobody wants to say anything for fear of upsetting others. At the same time, people don't like to put some of their feelings into words because it makes them more real for them. And so when people aren't really discussing a situation at hand, I do think it makes it more difficult. It makes it more difficult for people to come together as a family in commiseration with one another. It makes it more difficult to make decisions. Another caregiving story for me is when I was 14, I grew up in Queens. My dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. And then, in those days, and I'm also 67, so I'm right there with you, Betsy. But in those days, when I was 14, so we're talking about 1972, people didn't mention cancer, right? People refer to it as a big C.
Right.
And so nobody in my family talked about my dad's cancer. Nobody talked about how it was affecting him. No one talked about how it was affecting each of us. No one talked about what was going to happen. It was just silence. And I can tell you, as a 14 and later 15-year-old, when my dad died, it made that loss much more difficult. And then afterwards, nobody talked about my dad's death all that much. And so, I mean, again, those were those old times years ago. I think things are better now. People are more accepting of feelings and more accepting of counseling, more accepting of taking charge of their own mental health and mental wellness. But there's still many families that we encounter that they don't want to put into words some of what they're going through because it's so painful for them.
Yes. I had Josh, who has a cognitive disability, tell me about how he felt. And I encouraged him, to go out weekly with his friends because they need that. I said, someone in this house needs to have fun, and that's all be you. And, and even now, I check in with him. Father's Day is very difficult. Around the time that, Matt died is very difficult. And Josh was a great caregiver. He was so proud of being a caregiver for his dad. And he even had a couple of shirts about, that being proud of being a caregiver. And I think that, it's just really difficult sometimes for children to say how they feel because they're afraid of upsetting their parents. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm just going to say from personal experience. And I think that if we cut that communication off, we don't want our children getting advice from people that they will not get good advice from. It's better to, if we can't help them, then take them to a professional if they're willing to go who can help them. And I can't, stress that enough. Check in with your kids. And they can learn to be very compassionate people with caregiving. It could really, who knows, they could have a career in one of the medical fields, helping people from being a caregiver at a young age. But I just think that that's so important. When my brother died, my mother, I think it was 91 at the time, very much with it, but she would not talk about grieving. And I had suggested, grief counseling. And she was like, she's from that generation. I don't talk about my feelings. I don't air my dirty laundry. And she just wouldn't. And I felt so bad, Barry and Julia, for her because I know she was suffering inside. And yet she would not talk to anybody about how she felt because she felt that she had to keep it to herself. And I felt bad for her.
It's so sad because when you do share, it's an opportunity to feel closer. I'm so glad to hear that you and your son could talk about his feelings and he felt comfortable telling you because that's closeness. That's how we have emotional intimacy. And when people feel like they can't share their feelings, they suffer alone, they feel alone, and they miss out on an opportunity to feel more connected, more supported, understood. It is sad.
Yes, and I know you mentioned about support groups in your book and how important it is to belong to support groups, and I can't stress that enough. Whether if someone can't go in person, there's a lot of support groups online. 2014, I went on Facebook, and I went crazy joining support groups. I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough information. I was alone for 14 years. I wanted support. I was like, wow, there's other people who feel the same way. And at that time, in 2014, people were not forthcoming in saying that their loved one had Alzheimer's or whatever dementia. They weren't forthcoming in their sharing their experiences out in the open. So they did it in private groups. And I've been encouraging the caregivers to share their stories for years, and I'm glad finally now people are sharing. You see it all over social media, and I'm glad that the AARP is also letting people share their stories. I mean, it's great that it's finally coming along where people are sharing, and people won't feel as alone as they did before.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Facebook groups. I mean, there are many very active caregiver Facebook groups that some of them focus on specific diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Some of them are just more general. You mentioned the AARP Facebook group for caregivers. I think the AARP Facebook group has something like 22,000 members, and there are other very large ones. And if you just scroll through them, people really pour their hearts out about what they're experiencing, what kind of support they need, and the other participants just provide such good advice, but also such wonderful emotional support. So if you're not the kind of person that wants to sit in a room with a bunch of other people because that's just not comfortable for you, certainly going online and really taking advantage of all the resources out there on Facebook and on TikTok and other channels is a great idea. So support comes in many forms. So support group is one. Having a wonderful spouse like Julia is another. Just having a good close friend who you really can trust, who can be a confidant for you to talk about whatever you need to talk about, and that's extremely important. And then, as you pointed out a number of times, Betsy, having the courage to seek counseling, not because you necessarily are depressed or anxious, but because you really just need somebody to be a sounding board, someone to be a listener, an empathetic listener for you, to help you really get some perspective on what you're going through, and so that, again, you don't feel so alone. Those are all great ideas for support.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both, Dr. Barry Jacobs and Dr. Julia Mayer, for writing this awesome book and coming on my show, spending time with me. I so enjoyed chatting with you. Where can people purchase this book?
So the AARP Caregiver Answer Book is available in all the usual book outlets. So certainly Amazon and Barnes & Noble websites. We like bookshop.org because it represents a lot of independent booksellers. And it's also available through the AARP website and the publisher's website. The publisher is Guilford Press. So it's pretty readily available, and we want it to be. We don't believe that all help is helpful. We want this book to be helpful. We want it to provide the answers that folks need in order to really get the lay of the land here and then do as good a job as possible, and so that they don't burn out, so that they really feel like they can negotiate all the many changes of caregiving and be able to thrive in the role rather than really sink in the role.
Thank you. Do you have any closing words, Dr. Julia Mayer?
Well, my hope is, and part of the reason I helped write this book, is that I want caregivers not to blame themselves and feel guilty and berate themselves for what they didn't do, but to feel like they did a really hard thing and they did it as well as they could, and they should feel proud of themselves and come away while they're still doing it every day, patting themselves on the back, and certainly once the caregiving ends, to feel like they can feel good about what they did and that the mission that they were on, and that they accomplished something impressive.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's enough to make me cheer up, Julia. That is just beautiful. And how can people contact you both?
We have a website, www.caregiveranswerbook.com. It has lots of information, not just about our new book, the AARP Caregiver Answer Book, but our previous books. And there's a way through that there's a portal on that website where you can send emails to us, and we'd be happy to interact with you. Would love to hear your stories and hear your questions too.
Oh, thank you. This was just fantastic, and I'm honored to have talking to you both today. Thank you again for joining me. Folks, you heard the fabulous Dr. Mary J. Jacobs and Dr. Julia L. Mayer. They are authors of the AARP Caregiver Answer Book. I can't say it enough. Run and get this book. Run to your computer, tablet, smartphone, phone, and bookstore and buy this phenomenal book. It is a book that I'm telling you will make a great gift any time of year. People are getting diagnosed daily with some kind of dementia, and now Parkinson's is on the rise. This book is so helpful, and I really do wish that a book like this was available for me. And that's why I do the show, and that's why I like having people on who are great resources, because I want you all to know about resources that I wish that were available to me or that I knew about in my youth when there wasn't many resources available. And all the information about today's show will be in the blog, so please read the blog that Jeannie White, who's the station manager, writes and produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Passion World Talk Radio Network, who makes this all possible. And I want to thank you all for listening, subscribing. Please share the show. I want to help as many people as possible, and they need to hear what Barry and Julia have said today. They need to know about this book. And thank you for listening. Chatting with Betsy is free to subscribe to on Spotify, Spreaker, and Amazon. You can program Alexa, if you have Alexa, to Chatting with Betsy. And you can find me on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, W-R-Z-E-L. And that's it for today. As I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.